I'll tell you, if you're overwhelmed by where to begin with digital transformation, start where failure costs the most, and that's your machines. And predictive maintenance is the lowest hanging fruit with the highest return of investment.
Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. Today, I'm joined once again by my esteemed colleague, Tom. Welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for coming back.
Hi, Niall. Thanks for having me.
I know we'd usually do introductions and things like that, but I think we could dive straight into the topic today because people know you by now, Tom. I mean, you're our star
I'm happy to do that.
solutions engineer for Senseye within Siemens, right? Unless you want to add to that in any way.
Mainly, I'm solutions engineering. So anything where you think there might be a requirement, reach out to me. Reach out to the rest of the team. I'm always here. If there's any questions or anything, always feel free.
That's awesome. Hopefully I didn't undersell you there either, because your role is very, very broad and a lot involved. And that's why we invite you on the podcast. Obviously, share those thoughts and especially the conversations you have with customers and potential customers. But I mean, so today's topic, we're talking about predictive maintenance and how it can enable digital transformation. And as we know, digital transformation is such a broad topic. And to us, predictive maintenance is a core focus, but in a lot of ways, it's a tiny dot on the map of a bigger project, or maybe it isn't. I mean, that's what we're talking about today, right? So let's get started and straight into it. I guess if we start with the big picture first and sort of expand a little bit. So, Tom, how would you define digital transformation in the context of industrial operations, first of all, just to lay the groundwork for this?
That's a good question. So I'll start by saying it really comes down to changing. So digital transformation means shifting from find and fix to predict and prevent effectively. So it's about connecting assets, unlocking data, making sure that you can do something with that, with a main objective to do things like reducing downtime, improve efficiency, make sure that the factory is a little bit more resilient to things. So you're not just reacting to problems as they rise. You can foresee some of that stuff coming before it comes. And crucially as well, making sure you don't do too much. So a big element of this is definitely, how can we prevent lots of over maintenance? That's the fundamental aspect of predictive maintenance. Digital transformation goes then much more broad, and it becomes, what can we have a digital twin version of? How can we start to drive this across other areas of the business? And it really starts to become now making sure that these different softwares and different solutions integrate with each other. That's a big headache for companies at the moment, where these different tools don't link as well as they could.
And do you think sometimes, I guess when anyone hears the term digital transformation, it can almost be a bit overwhelming. So like I said, there's so many different tools, strategies, places to get started. I mean, do you find that from customers that sometimes it's a bit overwhelming to start with?
I think it can be. I think it can seem overwhelming, but really when you start with predictive maintenance, you start by not just, you're not just fixing the machines, you're building trust across different departments. So it can seem daunting, but it becomes then, how do the finance team and the operations team and the maintenance team have this common goal? What's the common impact that you're trying to look at? And that impact comes from everything. I talk about predictive maintenance because it's my speciality, but it's the same for all different areas of a process.
And yeah, I guess if we focus on the maintenance, well, that's what focusing on the maintenance side. And I guess, different organisations we're in different stages of their journey. But if we think about the challenges organisations face, even just digitalising their maintenance strategy, maybe we could talk about that first. Well, what are those challenges?
One of the main ones is trying to unlock the data that's there. So many machines sit within most of these facilities or mines, quarries, steel processing plants, whatever it could be. And what you end up with are lots of machines that work effectively siloed. And maybe there's tags and little pieces of information that say, yeah, my part of the process is complete, move on to the next step. But there's lots more information within that. There's things like harmonic frequencies, there's pressures, there's flows, and all of this stuff changes over time. Also, the process changes over time. Maybe you start to manufacture a different product on the same pieces of equipment. And some of that machine will be brand new, and some of it will be legacy. And again, you have to figure out the best methods of making it all really work together harmoniously. And that's That's the difficult part of all of this. And also having, of course, different PLCs from different vendors, making sure all of these things can communicate with each other so that you as a business can do what you do best, making chocolate, making steel, whatever it might be. And that, for me, is really one of the biggest challenges, making sure that all of these different solutions work together. And that is daunting. I think that is a daunting thing.
Yeah, I guess that's particularly the case, when you talk about, a word we use often, about scale and across the enterprise. As soon as you get, to deploy digital transformation, I guess, across multiple sites, that's where the complexities start. Like you said, with different systems, different approaches, different culture, maybe as well.
That can be part of it. Yeah. So if you've always been in a reactive mode, changing, again, I link straight back to predictive maintenance, it becomes a cultural shift to change your approach.
And I guess, so let's, I guess, illustrate some of these points we've discussed so far in terms of sort of real life, or real world examples of where predictive maintenance has enabled this broader digital transformation. Is there anything you can share, Tom, on that side?
There is. The main one I would go to start with would be a global automotive plant that Senseye worked with. Looked at digitalizing the workflow, but kept facing, they kept facing costly unplanned downtime on a single stamping press. And just by implementing predictive maintenance on that one asset, they saved over £200,000, and effectively that was return of investment came very quickly. So that's a good example of where we've done this. And a global food and beverage customer, just thinking of a second, with large plants around the world, they weren't really sure where to begin. When we talk about digital transformation, with an example where predictive maintenance it really benefits you, I'll tell you, if you're overwhelmed by where to begin with digital transformation, start where failure costs the most, and that's your machines. And predictive maintenance is the lowest hanging fruit with the highest return of investment. And Senseye worked to centralize existing sensor data and mapped that data across into a digital twin of the factory to begin with. Locations of where the motors are, the pumps, the conveyors, ventilation systems, and so on. And effectively what we did then was we gave them visibility as soon as we could and gave them a digital fingerprint of all of those assets and understood very quickly what was healthy behavior and what was unhealthy behavior based on those metrics that we started to create. So, 2 to 5 days, normal operation, Senseye builds you a fingerprint of normal healthy operation. And equally, it could be in a failed state already. So that's a question we get asked often. So I'm caveating myself while I say it. A machine could be onboarded in a failed state. And again, every case closure gives you the chance to fill that back in and say, the machine was already failed. The bearings were 80% collapsed. Pretty much that last little grind in, that increased torque. We replaced it. That's why you've seen different results. But effectively, this has helped them to streamline what they do. Maintenance is now much more optimized and really it focuses on how much maintenance they do. So that's something that we've really helped them with. And that's just two of many examples that I could give to you.
Yeah, and like I say, two examples that are very different verticals, right, with different approaches. I mean, is there, when we talk about sort of digital transformation or predictive maintenance as an enabler for that, what sort of the differences? I mean, compare automotive versus food and beverage. If we want to put the two up against each other, is there differences in approaches or mindset or?
There is. So if you've got a process that runs start to finish non-stop, so if you think of something like paper manufacturing, that's something that you can't really stop it. It needs to continuously run, which means when you get the chance to stop the machines, typically you'll really strip things down. You'll change bearings that aren't perhaps completely collapsed, but you want to make sure they make it through the next window of operation. And that could be months long. Equally, if you've got a process where it stops and starts, that's where you might not need to do so much over maintenance, but reacting to stoppages, all these small little downtime events, conveyors that stop, bearings that collapse, and all the rest of it, they will start to impact you, collectively over time. So in food and beverage, that's a good example. In steel, that's a good example. You want to make sure that downtime is avoided. And I'm picking a few key ones that everybody knows, but there are, of course, hundreds, thousands of different processes and things being manufactured, tens of thousands of different things. What I would say is when we start to look at this, it comes down to what's the operation and what's the value of the product that's being manufactured or processed. And that is really what starts to impact, how much can we spend on the project as an initial outlay? What's the return of investment? That will change depending on, the business impact that we have. So if something's more valuable, if you start making medicine or you're making vaccines or vials of things or even tablets, this stuff is very valuable. So an hour of downtime here is enormous compared to, making potato chips or something smaller and less. So we have to factor that in, and we do factor that in when we do projects to make sure it aligns to the industry.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And the thing is, it's an important point to look at these nuances, because I guess when you're talking to these different customers and different verticals, it becomes clear which use cases are maybe more appropriate to one over the other, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's also understanding, you might get a very forward-thinking company. Sector is then irrelevant. It's a company that are trying to move forward and maybe take the risk of deploying something that they're not sure of. And also we get customers who are a little bit risk averse and they need a little bit more of an understanding first before they effectively dive in at the deep end. This is tried and tested. We can show that. But sometimes it really requires that hand holding, and we've got an approach for everybody.
And I guess key to maybe predictive maintenance as well, but certainly to digital transformation, a great deal of collaboration, involved across many different departments. But I guess if we focus on the predictive maintenance aspect, how does implementing predictive maintenance sort of bring the data, the systems, and the people together so they can sort of collaborate together and achieve those outcomes, some of which you've mentioned already?
I would say when you start with predictive maintenance, you're not just fixing the machines. You're building that trust across the different departments. So if it's reliability teams, operations, finance, they will all see an impact. And that alignment, I think, is quite rare across a business, to also have teams of people that start a project and they really sit right down at the bottom of the business, at the crux of things, making sure the machines do what they should do, all the way through to the CEO. And predictive maintenance, sometimes that's why it's complicated, because all these teams suddenly realize they've never had to work this closely together before. But equally, then you start to see the results. As a team, you start to achieve something. You start to have a direct impact, return of investment impact. It makes people's lives simpler. If you're not running around chasing after yourself so much, you can preempt things. You can order spares and parts into stock so they can be changed at the right time. That will have an impact on the process, the product. So you can make more. You can do more with less. And of course, right the way through the business, that has knock-on effects, positive knock-on effects, all the way to the top.
And actually, I wanted to pick out something you said sort of earlier in your answer. You said about departments coming together that potentially haven't worked together before. Is that something you see quite often? That that's the case, and B, that predictive maintenance helps to bring these teams together.
Yes, that is exactly what we see. We see companies where it's a new thing. Digital transformation, in its nature, is fairly new. In some organizations, it's already set up to work well. Maybe whatever it is they manufacture, there's lots of links across the business. But what we also see are the ones where they don't. And predictive maintenance gets them all in the same room. It makes you start to look at things and say, right, do we have the right equipment? Do we have the right process to deal with something when it goes wrong? If it goes wrong, what do we do? In some cases, like we're saying now, if it's reactive, you can use predictive maintenance to flip that whole process. So actually, predictive maintenance is a fantastic place to start in a digital transformation journey because of how many different impacts it has, and it pays for itself immediately. Immediately could be, depending on the process, a few months, a few years, but it depends as well on how much stuff you've already got in place. So if you don't have an existing network system of DCS and SCADA where data can be collected into one central location, saved in a historian, and then sent somewhere, you need to start actually implementing that first. That's one of the things you need to put in place before you go any further, so that data can be made available, made useful. And I guess what it helps you to do is understand what gaps have you got in the organization pretty quickly. I think that's what predictive maintenance is good for. That's one of the reasons I like starting projects with predictive maintenance, with an industrial edge solution in place, with the Brownfield Connect solution in place, and some other products from Siemens fit harmoniously into this.
So I guess when there is, let's say, nothing in place or very little in place, I guess it's about building out sort of a roadmap, and being, I guess, realistic on timelines and what can be achieved and when. But maybe you could talk a little bit about that process, Tom, for sort of mapping out, if we give an example of an organisation with very little data collection, etc., in place already.
So the essential part is really to have an element of standardization to start with, just across the process, so your DCS and SCADA network. And then, as far as I'm concerned, that's the main standard that we need to pull data uniformly into one place. And often, I think that's the part of our projects that we really look to deploy a simple Siemens solution. I just mentioned it. So something like Edge, something like Insights Hub, other products from Siemens that are really, really useful to do this. And also, from there, it starts to give you the ability to monitor things like energy consumption, look at areas of wastage, look at OEE calculations, using effectively the same information. So digital transformation is doing the most you can with what you've already got. And if you've already got some sensors, what data can we pull from? Do you already have historians? This is part of the scope project that we start every project with. So we understand, first of all, what are the limitations? What are the constraints that we already work with? And as much as possible, build a solution that fits in without huge capital expenditure of sensors and additional edge boxes and everything else. As much as possible, we'll use what's already there. But equally, if you're looking to transform, we can put a transformation layer in place to benefit you for the future. That's also got cybersecurity involved and all the rest of it. And this is then positioning you very well for long-term digital growth, digital transformation, adding new things, adding different, different PLCs from different vendors, different sensors. We use different sensors where we need to, maybe for a better IP rating or for a higher heat tolerance or something like that. And because Senseye is designed as an agnostic solution for any industry, any space, and also Brownfield Connect is specifically designed for things like this, so for linking different types of data together, we end up with a solution which is based on a few foundational technologies, but gives you an essential, process to build on for the future. And that's we're involved in many different projects, and the Siemens Accelerator project is designed kind of with this in mind. So the Accelerator portfolio in its entirety is how can we remove paper-based processes and do as much as we can with the data that's there, and then simulate things and digital twin things. This is the direction we will move in. Lots of companies now look towards this. I think if you look at growth, I realize this is a very long answer to your question, but it's a really good question, and it does include loads and loads of different elements. In terms of what's essential to start a project, a base layer, some sort of standardization across DCS and SCADA networks, and then we look forward from there and we make sure we build that in a scalable way. So things like Virtual Edge from Siemens, again, that's very scalable in the way it's been designed for this exact purpose.
No, long answers are good, Tom, because it means I'm talking less, which I think is the most benefit to an audience. If you're doing more of the talking than me, that's exactly what we want, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I was going to mention, because it's really interesting about these projects, and I guess what they generate more than anything as well is a lot of excitement, or you'd hope so. Everyone's really, we want to achieve this, we want to achieve that. Is it quite hard to sort of manage expectations, both, not just in terms of we're going to get this return on investment in 3 months' time, but also in terms of timelines for things. Oh, we want it rolled out like now or in 2 months' time, and this kind of thing. I mean, excitement's good, but is it also quite tricky with, because we know sometimes extra data is required or extra considerations, and that's what the scope workshop's for, of course. But is it hard? Sorry, my question's really long now, but is it hard to manage those expectations? Basically, what I'm asking.
The hardest thing I think with all of it is you're going to perhaps get different solutions from different companies, and whose job is it then within all of that to make sure it can be integrated seamlessly. So making sure that you can automate a process and standardize and all the rest of it. But what you need to try and do is it's to standardize the process. So does this predictive maintenance solution work with your CMMS solution, work with your EIP system? You need to make sure if you're going to digitalize, you don't end up with siloed solutions. In some cases, maybe one of them's got a chat functionality, the other one's got a chat functionality, and you start to create a little bit of chaos. And it's minimize that as much as you can, as soon as you can. And I think when it comes to answering your question, it's making sure there's some team, or at least someone who's got a good understanding of what's happening. And when you absorb a new solution, make sure it's running on, it's got an API architecture that's going to work cross-functionally across different things. Make sure if you've got sensors, they communicate with standard methods. So they can send data on a standard protocol that can be collected and sent to cloud via MQTT or whatever format it is, in standard ways that are, allow that flexibility for the future.
And I guess, in relation to that, 'cause I know one of the questions on our list was about IT and OT and sort of bridging those two together. Does that form part of that, what you were saying then there as well? Sort of, if it helps with that.
It does, yeah. And I think every business wants to be data-driven, but most are still flying blind to a certain degree. You need to find the best way of linking your field level, the operational technology, up through the IT technology. As far as I'm concerned, predictive maintenance is the best way of doing that, because you start having machines that break down inherently based on mechanical systems, bearings, sprockets, chains, motors. These things are all going to break down, but these are the fundamental backbone to how an organization makes things. Crushes stone in a quarry, pulls iron ore out of the ground, or whatever it is, or if it's making chocolate, again, right the way across the different processes that we're looking at. It's then, how do you get the data out? How do you push that securely to cloud? Making sure data is encrypted and all the rest of it, making sure you've got controllers and different devices throughout your network that do certain jobs, and there's standards for everything. Siemens, I think I happily would say, are leading the way in industry. Biggest player globally in many, many different sectors of this. And we're very good at understanding how the OT and IT can connect together with different hardware and software solutions. So again, if you were to come to me and ask questions, I can answer certain elements of it, and I've got colleagues that can answer the rest. Equally, across the whole of Siemens, there's teams that could even consult on this, help you understand what you've got, what you need, where are you trying to head long term. The difficult thing is, Noel, when you start to ask, where does PDM fit in digital transformation? It is such a massive topic, and it covers so many things that you have to understand. What's the end goal? I think first of all, focus on what are you trying to achieve, and I would say almost always the goal is to do more with less, to increase profit margins and all the rest of it. And that's why I think predictive maintenance is one of the best places you can start.
No, absolutely. And I think another really, another plus point, let's say, for predictive maintenance as well, is because it can impact, other business functions. And I think we talked about it a little bit earlier on, but, as examples like production planning or quality assurance or supply chain management. So maybe you could talk about that as well. And then it's more of what I'd call not a side benefit, but an additional benefit, right? It's not the core focus, but if it can impact other parts of the business, then surely that's what digital transformations are all about, right? You don't want it just to be isolated on one particular area of an organization.
That's exactly it. And if you just take a machine, for example, that's got a trending failure, so something that starts to collapse long term, maybe you don't see that until it breaks. But when you add something like predictive maintenance, you can see how that maybe slows production, because you can see how it starts to break, and then you can do something in a planned maintenance where it's maybe the night shift and you're doing something at half speed or whatever it is. But if you know when something's going to break, or you can anticipate things going wrong, you can see across a fleet of different assets that one of them is an outlier. That's where you can start to impact production, which, you don't need to be a rocket scientist, has a direct impact on the bottom line of the business, because you now know that there's a certain flag within that. There's a recurring pattern or something's going wrong. You can improve the procurement process. You could get those spares into stock earlier because you know that part is already failing. You don't need to rely on long lead times of that component, or maybe you've seen in the past that particular unique component has to be custom made or whatever it might be. This is it blew my mind when I could first see what Senseye is capable of, learning baseline so quickly and starting to trend things and see where something's going wrong, look at step changes and anomalous spikes in the data. This all allows you to have smarter decisions across the whole business. And that is the fundamental part of this, because it allows you to do structured planning for the future. And that's one thing all across industry that you need more of. It's more time to think and react. React not to the machines going wrong, but react to different alerts, different preemptive information that's coming through to you. It could even be that there's a traffic jam on XYZ motorway, and that now causes you to have a whole shipment of parts is delayed, and you need those as raw material to do something else. So if you could GPS track the trucks, for example, which is what the likes of Amazon do, you can anticipate that there's something changed, and you can change your planning accordingly. And that's a huge benefit to anybody who's trying to run a process.
So you mentioned that, Tom. So so many amazing. What I call them is like little treasure. I'm going to start that again. God. So what you mentioned there, Tom, is some really, really great examples. I sort of, the way I imagine it is like little treasure chests that, as you're sort of rolling out predictive maintenance in an organization and maybe you start to scale, it's like, oh, there's another little benefit here, or another little benefit here. Maybe not so little, actually. Maybe I'm underselling it there. But it's that kind of thing. You discover all these maybe unexpected benefits along the way, because like you say, in the scope workshop, you're planning, what return on investment potentially, what assets to focus on, what do we want to achieve? But then there must be like unexpected stuff like that just keep popping up and surprise people, right?
Exactly. And this is the reason we've got companies that have scaled to having, tens of thousands of assets online with Senseye, because it does that. And then because it learns baseline so quickly, you can then do that at scale. And when those assets learn baseline, you set them up, you link the sensors, you parameterize it. So you set things like off-state filtering. So you know when the machine is running and when it's not, when it should learn things and when not to. From there, you can then just leave those things to sort of self-regulate. You've got AI functionality that's going to monitor things, look for things. Then when a case is raised, it will show you what's going wrong. It will pull things from the PDF documents, from the user manuals and so on. And that's really powerful, because then all of this different information is coming to you from different sources. So again, you've got things like your PDF manual, the user spec documents, whatever it might be. The data has been pulled from this. Simultaneously, it's also been pulled from what the users have written down in the past as they've closed the case. We've cleared the cowlings on the motor to help it cool down and other things. And all of this stuff, including, of course, the live telemetry, is pulled into one central location. So already with one SaaS solution, one software, you're doing absolutely loads with information that you've already got. Then you've got other solutions across the business. You've got how that integrates with a CMMS solution that you've already got in place, and how all of this stuff links through the business. This is what Industry 4 is, and this has been talked about for at least a decade. I think the phrase was first coined in Germany, at least I'd say 10 or 15 years ago, maybe longer. But what now starts to happen is this is becoming a reality. I remember someone saying to me once, the long-term future of industry is that something's going wrong. The system will self-detect a problem. It will then reorder those parts autonomously. They would get ordered. That would arrive. A small, AGV would go off and collect the component. It would also collect the tools that you need and park next to the machine that's broken down and just put on an alert, like a beacon to say, workers should come over and fix this machine. If you add the next step, you've got the likes of, humanoid robots that may, in the not too distant future, start coming and doing those repairs for you. But again, this is where Industry 4 is going to be layered and layered and layered on top of itself. And predictive maintenance, I really do believe, is the core fundamental element to that. So you can anticipate what is happening with your machinery.
Yeah, and soon we'll be talking about Industry 5.0, no doubt, or maybe
Absolutely.
6.0. Maybe we'll skip ahead. But
let's get Industry 4 nailed first, I think, is where I currently sit.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, actually. But yeah, so I guess as we come towards the end, I just wanted to sort of round up and sort of finish with one final question. And it's around, I guess, some of the misconceptions sort of leaders might have around predictive maintenance, where it fits in digital transformation. Is there anything you can sort of comment on that side, Tom?
The main one, and I've heard it plenty of times, is that we need to digitalize everything before we start predictive maintenance. We're not ready for predictive maintenance. We've still got this and this and this other thing to do. Now, some of those other solutions might help with communication across the business or something else, which is equally important. But one of the best places to start is PDM. And it's often the entry point to digital, I think. It's that misconception that it's just a tool for the maintenance team, but we've already spoken about just in this podcast and in others in the past, and we're talking about this every week with customers, that it has enormous impacts across the entire organizations, and it has financial impact, all positive, because it's saving you money through all the advantages it gives you. So sometimes I kind of think, how has that become a misconception? And I think often it comes down to not fully understanding what you're trying to achieve. So first of all, it's aiming for, what exactly is it we're going to achieve? What's the best, most effective way of doing that for the long term, not just a solution that benefits us for the next 2 years until we find out it doesn't integrate with anything. Is it an open platform? Does it integrate across? Does it help the rest of the organization? Will it do that long term? I think that answers your question pretty well.
It does. And what I'd usually do at this point is say that was the final question and ask another question to contradict myself. But I think actually you've summarised it very well, Tom. And not just that answer actually, but throughout today, I think it's probably, hopefully it's opened up the eyes to a lot of people that predictive maintenance can be that enabler for digital transformation.
It can, and I think you can see that we're having a lot of these conversations quite often, and it's not the first time that, obviously you're asking me these questions today, but these are things that come up at least once a month with different organizations that we either see in person or that we speak to online. And it is changing. It is definitely changing. We're starting to see a bigger groups of people who understand more of this. I'm learning about this every week. I'm also speaking to different colleagues across Siemens, and we're building a very good picture of, how the different divisions can work well together. Accelerator and Roland Bush has got the right idea with all of this, of how we make all of these different products work together seamlessly is the key.
Exactly. And what a nice way to end the episode today. So thank you, Tom, once again for sharing your insights. Of course, we'll invite you back for future episodes too, if you're open to it.
It's always a pleasure.
Fantastic. But yeah, so thank you for your time today. And thank you everyone out there for listening, wherever you are. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.